Karen stood in front of the magnificent historic monument, her heart racing with excitement. The bright blue sky above and the crowd of tourists around her made the moment feel even more special. She had been dreaming of visiting this famous place for weeks, and now here she was, ready to make memories. However, there was one thing standing between her and the perfect photo: the guard. He stood nearby, in his uniform, watching the tourists carefully. Karen had seen him before in countless photos of the monument, always standing with a stern look, but never blocking anyone's view. Today, however, he seemed to be in her way. She wanted the picture-perfect moment, a photo that would capture her excitement, the beauty of the place, and, of course, her best side. After all, this was going to be the highlight of her social media feed. With a smile on her face, Karen quickly pulled out her phone from her purse. She aimed the camera, adjusting the focus on the background. The tall stone walls of the monument loomed behind her, and the sunlight cast a soft glow across her face. But there was one problem: the guard. He stood just a few feet away, looking at the tourists. But his position in her shot was undeniable. To make it perfect, she would need to move him out of the frame. Karen felt a sense of impatience creeping in. She had been waiting for this moment for so long. She had traveled hours to get here, and now that she was at the front of the monument, she wasn't about to let something so small ruin her photo. She quickly glanced around to make sure no one was paying too much attention. The tourists around her were busy taking their own pictures, and the guard was looking the other way. Her fingers hovered over the camera screen, adjusting the settings to get the lighting just right. She was sure that once she clicked the shutter button, the photo would be amazing. But there he was again, the guard, still in her perfect shot. The moment was slipping away. Without thinking much, Karen sighed and looked at the guard once more. He had no idea how important this picture was to her, how much it meant to capture everything in the frame. Karen was determined to get the perfect photo, and to her, that meant doing whatever it took to make it happen. Her heart raced, and a thought crossed her mind. "I can just ask him to move," she thought. But then another idea struck her. What if she could just get the shot without bothering him? Just a small nudge, just a gentle push to get him out of the way. That way, she could keep the moment uninterrupted. With her mind made up, Karen took a deep breath. She adjusted her stance, taking a step forward, and then, in one swift motion, she lightly pushed the guard, just enough to move him out of the shot. In that brief moment, everything seemed to stop. Her phone was still raised in the air, the camera ready to capture the perfect image. But as the guard turned to face her, Karen froze. She didn't realize it at first, but what she had just done wasn't as harmless as she thought. The quiet air around her was suddenly filled with tension, and the moment she had hoped for now felt like it was slipping away. Karen's excitement faded as she looked into the guard's eyes. Eyes that were no longer calm. Eyes that seemed to say that this was more than just a small mistake. Karen's excitement quickly turned to unease as she watched the guard's expression shift from calm to serious. For a brief moment, she thought it was just her imagination. After all, she hadn't pushed him hard, just a gentle nudge to clear her shot. But as he straightened up, Karen realized that she may have crossed a line she didn't even know existed. Her mind raced. It was just a little push, she told herself. No harm done, right? She glanced around at the people nearby, most of them focused on their own photos. No one seemed to notice, at least not yet. The thought of her perfect photo still filled her mind, the vision of a picture that would shine on her social media for all to see. But as she looked back at the guard, she felt a wave of uncertainty. The perfect photo was still within reach. If only she could get him to move a little bit. That would be enough to make her picture stand out from the rest. She wanted to impress her followers, to show them that she had been to one of the world's most famous landmarks. This was her moment, and she wasn't about to let anything get in the way. As her fingers tightened around the phone, Karen began to feel a small spark of frustration. She had traveled so far to visit this monument. Her friends had all been talking about their perfect vacation photos for months. She didn't want to be left behind with a dull, ordinary picture. This shot had to be amazing. It had to be different. But the longer she stood there, the more she realized that she was focusing too much on the photo and not enough on the people around her. The guard was still standing, watching her, and his gaze had become sharper. He didn't look like he was about to back down. For the first time, Karen felt nervous about the situation. She thought about asking him politely to step aside, but that didn't seem to fit her plan. Why ask when she could just take control of the situation herself? She had done it before at other tourist spots, pushed through crowds or made quick adjustments to get her perfect shot. In those moments, it had worked out just fine. But this was different. This wasn't just a crowded street or a busy park. This was a place where rules were important. And Karen knew, deep down, that she might have misunderstood the situation. The guard's role wasn't just to stand there and look good for photos. He was there to protect the monument, to make sure everything went smoothly. As she stared at him, Karen's excitement began to melt away, replaced by a strange feeling of guilt. She had acted on impulse without thinking of the consequences. In her desire to capture the perfect moment, she had forgotten about the respect she needed to show to others. Her phone, still raised in her hands, now felt heavier than before. The idea of the perfect shot seemed less important. What was more important now was the realization that she may have been wrong to push the guard at all. Still, Karen wasn't ready to let go of her goal just yet. She needed to focus. Maybe if she apologized, the guard would understand. Or maybe the situation could still be fixed. She just had to make sure she didn't let the perfect photo slip away, no matter what happened next. Karen's mind was racing, and her heart was pounding in her chest. She hadn't meant to cause a scene, but now she was standing there, unsure of what to do next. The guard's stare felt like it was piercing through her, and the moment she had been waiting for now seemed so distant. Her perfect picture was still there, waiting to be taken, but now it was complicated. The guard didn't speak right away. He just stood there, his posture stiff and unmoving, his eyes fixed on her. It was as if he was waiting for something, waiting for her to speak, or perhaps to apologize. Karen wasn't sure, but the silence between them felt heavy. She had expected the situation to be over in seconds, with just a quick nudge and a photo. Now it was anything but simple. Karen slowly lowered her phone, realizing that she had taken things too far. The photo no longer seemed important, not in the way it had before. But as she tried to think of the best way to move forward, the guard's reaction still echoed in her mind. He was watching her closely, and she knew that the next few moments would determine how this situation played out. Maybe I should just apologize, Karen thought. But the idea made her feel even more nervous. Apologizing meant admitting that she had done something wrong, and that was hard for her to do, especially when she felt so certain that all she had wanted was a simple photo. It was just one little push after all. Still, something about the guard's unwavering stance made Karen realize that this wasn't just about her desire for a perfect picture. It was about respect. Respect for the place, the people, and the rules. She couldn't ignore the feeling that maybe she had crossed a line. In her mind, she had been doing what many other tourists did, adjusting the scene to get the best angle. But the guard was not like the other tourists. He wasn't there to be a background prop. He had a job to do. Karen shifted her weight from one foot to the other, unsure of what to say. The guard remained silent, his arms folded in front of him. He didn't seem angry, but there was no warmth in his expression either. Karen wondered if he was thinking about how to respond to her. I didn't mean to be rude, Karen thought to herself. I just wanted a good photo. I thought it wouldn't be a big deal. But as the minutes ticked by, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was a bigger deal than she had first realized. Maybe it wasn't just about the photo. Maybe the real issue was her approach. She had wanted something for herself, something to show off to her friends, without thinking about the impact of her actions on someone else. Finally, the guard broke the silence. His voice was calm but firm, his words measured. "Excuse me, ma'am. I need to ask that you do not push or touch the staff. This is a historic site, and we need to respect the rules." Karen's stomach sank as she heard the words. She hadn't expected him to speak so formally. The weight of what she had done settled on her shoulders. This wasn't just a harmless moment, it was a lesson. Her perfect photo now seemed insignificant compared to the realization that her actions had consequences. She stood frozen, wondering how she had gotten to this point. Would she apologize, or would she continue to push for the photo? The decision seemed much harder now. Karen's heart was beating faster now. The guard's words hung in the air, clear and firm. She hadn't expected him to speak like that, especially after just a small push. It felt like the situation had spiraled out of her control in an instant. The perfect photo she had wanted seemed so far away now, like it didn't matter anymore. What had started as a small, impulsive action had turned into something much bigger. She could feel the eyes of the people around her. Some were still busy taking photos of the monument, but others had turned their attention to the scene between Karen and the guard. It wasn't the kind of attention she wanted. Karen looked down at her phone, the camera still open but forgotten in her hands. She felt embarrassed and unsure of what to do next. She hadn't planned for this. The last thing she expected was to cause trouble. The guard didn't seem to be angry, but his posture was still stiff and unwelcoming. He stood tall, his uniform sharp and neat, his hands folded in front of him. His eyes weren't harsh, but they were serious, as though he was waiting for her to acknowledge the mistake she had made. The silence between them stretched on, and Karen wasn't sure if she should say something or just walk away. "I didn't mean to make things worse," Karen thought. "I only wanted a simple picture, not to upset anyone." But the truth was, Karen had pushed him. Not literally, but by making a decision without thinking. She had let her desire for the perfect photo cloud her judgment, and now she was paying the price. The guard's reminder about respecting the rules felt like a slap to the face, a cold reminder that her actions had consequences. The supervisor, a taller man in a different uniform, walked over to join them. Karen glanced at him, feeling the weight of the situation become even heavier. The supervisor's eyes shifted from Karen to the guard and back again, taking in the scene. His presence only made Karen feel more anxious. She was caught in a moment she had hoped to avoid, and now she had to face the consequences. The supervisor spoke, his voice calm but direct. "Ma'am, I need to know what happened here," he said. "Why did you push the guard?" Karen opened her mouth to explain, but no words came out. Her mind was spinning, and she struggled to find the right thing to say. What could she possibly say that would make this better? There was no excuse for what she had done. She had made a mistake, and she knew it. I didn't mean anything by it," Karen finally said, her voice shaky. "I just wanted to get a picture without anyone in the shot. I didn't think it would cause a problem." The supervisor's gaze softened for a moment, but the seriousness didn't leave his face. "It's not about the picture, ma'am," he said. "It's about respecting the people around you and following the rules." Karen nodded slowly, realizing how much she had taken things for granted. She had been so focused on herself, on the perfect photo, that she had forgotten about everyone else around her. The guard had a job to do, and she had ignored that. The supervisor didn't immediately speak again, but his presence made Karen feel small and insignificant in that moment. Her heart sank as the reality of her actions settled in. She hadn't just made a small mistake. She had disrespected someone who was simply doing his job. And now, there were consequences. The air felt thick with tension, and Karen's thoughts were racing. She could feel her face turning red with embarrassment, but the weight of the situation was more than just her own discomfort. It was the realization that she had made a mistake. The guard stood there, his posture still stiff and formal. He didn't seem angry, but there was something in his eyes that made Karen feel even worse. It was a mixture of disappointment and authority, and it made her feel like she had let him down. As the supervisor stood beside the two of them, Karen felt small, as though the world around her had slowed down. She was trapped in a moment she had never imagined would happen. She had only wanted to take a simple photo, but now she was facing the consequences of her actions. The crowd around them had quieted, and Karen could sense that they were all watching her, some with curiosity, others with judgment. The guard didn't speak right away, and Karen wondered what he was thinking. Was he angry with her? Did he feel insulted by her push? She wanted to apologize, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. What could she say that would make things right? Finally, the guard spoke. His voice was calm but firm, with no hint of anger in it. "I understand that tourists want the best photos," he said, his gaze never leaving Karen. "But we have rules here. It's important that everyone respects the space and the people around them." Karen's chest tightened. His words were kind but serious. He wasn't shouting or raising his voice. He was just stating the facts. But somehow, the way he said it made her realize how thoughtless she had been. She had been so focused on her own desire for the perfect picture that she hadn't thought about the other people around her. The guard wasn't just a barrier to her photo. He was part of the reason the monument was kept safe and respected. She had overlooked that. "I'm sorry," Karen whispered, her voice soft. "I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I just wanted to get a good picture. I didn't think it would matter." The guard's expression didn't change, but there was a slight shift in his eyes, as if he was considering her words. Karen could feel the weight of the apology in her chest, and she hoped that it would be enough to fix the situation. But even as the words left her lips, she knew that the damage had already been done. She had pushed someone, and it was more than just a simple mistake. It was a reminder of how easy it was to overlook the people around her when she was chasing something for herself. The supervisor gave Karen a quick glance, as though evaluating her sincerity. Then he turned to the guard, nodding as if confirming something. Karen held her breath, unsure of what would happen next. Would there be consequences? Would she be asked to leave the site? The supervisor finally spoke, his tone softer now. "This is a reminder for all of us. We're here to enjoy the place and respect the rules. I hope we can move forward without any more issues." Karen nodded, grateful but still embarrassed. She had learned a valuable lesson in that moment. It wasn't just about getting the perfect shot or impressing others. It was about understanding the importance of respect and how even the smallest actions could have larger consequences. She looked at the guard again, and this time, she didn't just see him as someone in her way. She saw him as someone who was doing his job, protecting the integrity of the place she had come to visit. "I'll be more careful next time," Karen said quietly. The words felt sincere, and she hoped the guard could see that. She had learned her lesson, and she was determined not to make the same mistake again. Karen stood there, feeling the weight of the moment settling deep within her. The tension in the air had eased, but the lesson she had just learned was still fresh in her mind. The supervisor's words echoed in her head. "We're here to enjoy the place and respect the rules." She had been so focused on her desire to capture the perfect photo that she had completely overlooked the bigger picture. Her actions had consequences. For the first time, Karen took a moment to look around. She had been so wrapped up in her own little world, chasing after a perfect image to share with her friends, that she hadn't truly seen the beauty around her. The monument, with its centuries-old stones and timeless history, stood tall and proud in the center of the plaza. Tourists from all over the world were scattered around, taking photos, chatting, and admiring the view. And the guard, he wasn't just a person in her way. He was there to protect the integrity of this place, to make sure everyone respected the monument and its history. Karen felt a pang of guilt. She had acted out of impatience, driven by the need to impress others with a single perfect moment. But what had that really accomplished? It hadn't made her any happier or more fulfilled. Instead, it had left her embarrassed and uncomfortable, and it had disrupted the peaceful atmosphere that others had come to enjoy. The guard, still standing nearby, was now just going about his work, his presence no longer the obstacle she had once seen it as. He moved calmly and with purpose, watching over the crowd with the same professionalism he had shown before. Karen realized that his role was important, far more important than her fleeting need for a perfect photo. He wasn't there for her convenience. He was there to maintain order and preserve the monument's legacy. As the moments passed, Karen felt a shift inside her. She had come to this place looking for a picture, a quick snapshot that would make her feel good about herself. But what she had gotten instead was a lesson in respect, patience, and humility. She had learned that sometimes the pursuit of perfection could blind a person to the things that truly mattered. The best memories weren't always the ones captured by a camera, but the ones created through experience and understanding. Her phone still lay in her hand, but now, the thought of taking a photo didn't seem as important. Karen glanced at the others around her. Families posing for pictures, people chatting about their travels, and tourists taking in the beauty of the place. Everyone was simply enjoying the moment, not trying to chase something they could hold in their hands. They were experiencing the monument for what it truly was, not through a lens, but through their own eyes. Karen took a deep breath and looked back at the guard. She gave him a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson she had just learned. She didn't need to say anything more. He had already shown her more than she had expected. Her apology had been accepted, and now it was time for her to move forward with a new perspective. As Karen walked away from the monument, she couldn't help but smile softly to herself. The perfect photo she had wanted didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she had learned to respect the moment, and sometimes that was worth more than any picture could ever capture. As Karen walked away from the monument, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand. She couldn't shake the feeling of regret that had settled in her chest. The day, which had started so full of excitement and anticipation, now felt different. The perfect photo she had wanted seemed like a distant thought, something she no longer cared about. Instead, she felt something deeper, an understanding that she had let her desire for a simple, perfect image cloud her judgment. She glanced back over her shoulder at the monument, still grand and beautiful, standing in the warm sunlight. The guard was still there, doing his job as he had been all along. This time, Karen saw him not as an obstacle to her photo, but as part of the reason the place was so special. He wasn't just standing there for the sake of it. He was there to protect something that had lasted for centuries, and she had taken that for granted. The crowd around her had mostly returned to their own business, tourists chatting, families laughing, and others snapping their own photos. Karen, however, felt out of place. While others were simply enjoying their time, she was left with the realization that she had let her selfishness take over. All she had wanted was a photo that would make her look good in front of others, a moment she could share online to get likes and comments. But now, she wondered if that was really worth it. The regret settled deeper inside her as she walked through the plaza. What could she have done differently? She could have just asked the guard to move politely, or better yet, she could have simply waited for the right moment, instead of rushing into a decision that had made things uncomfortable for everyone involved. In the grand scheme of things, was a perfect photo really worth pushing someone aside for? Karen felt her shoulders tense up as she replayed the scene in her head. She had been so focused on her own desire for the perfect image that she had forgotten about the people around her. The guard was doing his job, and she had disrespected that. Worse, she had done it without thinking of the impact it might have on him or anyone else around her. As she walked, she found herself wishing she could go back and undo the push. If only she had taken a deep breath and stepped back for a moment. Maybe things would have turned out differently, but there was no going back now. The words she had spoken in apology had been sincere, but they couldn't erase the feeling that she had made a mistake. And that feeling wasn't just about the photo. It was about the way she had treated someone who was simply doing his job. Karen stopped for a moment, looking at the people around her, some still posing for pictures, others chatting and laughing. She felt like an outsider in her own mind, disconnected from the simple enjoyment of the place. Everyone else seemed so calm, so at ease, and there she was, consumed by regret over something that, in hindsight, seemed so small. She sighed and put her phone away. For the first time that day, Karen realized that maybe, just maybe, The photo wasn't the most important thing after all. It was the experience, the people, the place, the history, that truly mattered. And now she had learned a lesson that she would carry with her long after the day was over. As she left the monument behind, she couldn't help but smile a little. The perfect picture was no longer her goal. What mattered now was the lesson she had learned, and how she would approach her next moment with a new sense of respect and understanding. As Karen left the monument behind and made her way through the plaza, she couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The regret she had felt earlier was now mixed with a sense of understanding. The incident had been uncomfortable, but it had taught her something important. The perfect photo she had once been so focused on now seemed unimportant. She had come to realize that her actions had consequences, and she had learned a valuable lesson about respect, patience, and humility. Karen paused for a moment and looked up at the beautiful sky above her. The warm sun was setting in the distance, casting a golden glow across the plaza. Tourists were still gathering in small groups, chatting and laughing as they made their way to other parts of the monument. Some were taking photos, others just soaking in the beauty of the place. It was a peaceful moment, one that Karen now understood more deeply than before. As she walked through the plaza, Karen reflected on how she had allowed the pursuit of a perfect image to cloud her judgment. It hadn't been about the photo at all. It had been about her desire to impress others and seek validation. She had wanted to show everyone how great her vacation was, how stunning the photo would be. But in doing so, she had overlooked the importance of the experience itself. The monument, the people around her, and the moment were what truly mattered, not the image on her phone. The more Karen thought about it, the clearer it became. She had been so focused on getting that one shot, that perfect image, that she had forgotten to just enjoy the moment. The photos she took wouldn't capture the full essence of the place, the feeling of standing there, surrounded by history, or the sense of respect that came with being in such a meaningful location. What she had done wasn't just about taking a picture. It was about showing care and respect for others who were sharing the experience with her. Karen smiled softly to herself as she walked toward the exit of the plaza. The guard she had apologized to earlier was still there, quietly doing his job. She noticed that his posture had softened, and he seemed more relaxed than before. Maybe he had already moved past the incident, or maybe he, too, had learned something from the situation. Karen felt a sense of peace knowing that, despite the awkwardness, things had been handled with respect on both sides. In that moment, Karen understood the value of slowing down and being more present. She didn't need a perfect photo to remember the day. The lessons she had learned, the importance of patience, respect, and awareness, would stick with her far longer than any picture ever could. Karen took a deep breath and looked around at the other tourists. Some were still trying to capture their perfect shots, others simply enjoying the view. But for Karen, the lesson had already been learned. The next time she found herself focused on a photo, she would take a moment to think about what really mattered. It wasn't the photo or the perfect shot. It was the experience, the respect for others, and the memories she would carry with her. As she walked out of the plaza, Karen felt lighter. The weight of regret had lifted, and in its place was a new understanding. She had made a mistake, but she had also learned from it. And that made all the difference. She smiled to herself, knowing that the true beauty of the moment couldn't be captured in a picture, but in the lesson it had taught her. As Karen made her way down the cobblestone streets, the cool evening air gently brushed against her skin. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the plaza. It was a peaceful end to a day that had begun with so much excitement. But now, Karen felt a sense of calm wash over her. The lesson she had learned earlier was settling in, and it made her feel more at peace with herself. She had come to the monument hoping for the perfect photo, a shot that would be shared with friends, liked by strangers, and admired by everyone. But instead, she had learned something much more important. It wasn't about how many likes a photo could get or how perfect the image looked. It was about how she interacted with the world around her, the people she met, and the experiences she had. She realized that in the rush to capture an image, she had almost missed out on everything that really mattered. As she walked through the streets, Karen began to notice things she hadn't before. The sounds of laughter coming from nearby cafes, the sweet smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the air, and the soft hum of people enjoying their evening. She had been so focused on the idea of perfection, she had overlooked the beauty of the moment itself. Now she was fully present in it. She thought back to the guard at the monument. His calm demeanor, his firm but respectful words, and the way he handled the situation had stuck with her. He hadn't raised his voice or made her feel worse than she already did. He had simply done his job, and in the process, he had helped her understand something important. Respect and patience were far more valuable than a perfect shot, and sometimes, taking a step back was the best way to move forward. Karen knew she would always remember the lesson she had learned that day. It wasn't just about respecting others. It was about being mindful of the bigger picture. It was easy to get caught up in small things, like the perfect photo, and forget that there were much more meaningful moments happening all around her. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the quiet street, and Karen felt lighter with each step. She didn't need to post a perfect photo to share her experience with the world. She could share the story behind it, the lesson she had learned, and how it had changed her perspective. That, she realized, was more important than any image on her phone. As Karen reached the end of the street, she found a small bench overlooking a quiet park. She sat down, letting out a deep breath. The day had been full of unexpected twists, but now it felt complete. She had learned to slow down, to be more aware of her actions, and to appreciate the beauty of the world around her, without the pressure to capture every moment. Karen pulled out her phone once again, not to take another photo, but to scroll through the ones she had already taken. She smiled at the memories they held, but more importantly, she felt a sense of peace knowing that she didn't need to chase after perfection anymore. Life wasn't about getting the perfect picture. It was about experiencing the moments, learning from them, and growing along the way. As the sun set completely and the stars began to twinkle above her, Karen knew that this day would remain in her heart for a long time. It wasn't the photo she had imagined that would stay with her. It was the lesson she had learned, and the understanding that life's most important moments could never be captured in a picture. They were meant to be lived.